The morning sun gleamed off the polished stones of Buckingham Palace's grand courtyard. Tourists gathered in droves, eagerly waiting to witness the world-famous changing of the guard. Among them stood Veronica Langley, a woman who saw herself not as a visitor, but as royalty in her own right. Dressed in the latest designer athleisure wear, her sunglasses perched atop perfectly coiffed blonde waves, Veronica barely spared a glance at the historic surroundings. Instead, she focused on her phone screen, adjusting the angle for the perfect selfie. She was here for one reason: to capture a moment, not to appreciate tradition. As she strutted through the growing crowd, she muttered under her breath, "Honestly, why do these people even care about a bunch of guys in fancy hats?" When a palace attendant politely gestured for her to stay behind the designated barriers, she scoffed. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'm not some common tourist. I have an influencer brand. I need the best shot." She stepped forward, ignoring the warnings, and planted herself right in the middle of the guard's ceremonial path. With a satisfied smirk, she raised her phone. She had no idea what was coming next. The rhythmic sound of boots striking stone echoed through the courtyard as the royal guard approached. A disciplined, unbroken wall of red and black, their movements precise and unwavering. Tourists held their breath, cameras flashing, eyes wide with anticipation. But in the center of the path, Veronica stood her ground, oblivious. "They'll go around me," she muttered. "I mean, it's just for show, right?" But the guards didn't stop. They didn't slow. They didn't acknowledge her presence. Then it happened. A sharp voice rang out, "Make way for the Queen's Guard!" The lead guard, a towering figure with an unshakable gaze, did not adjust his step. His training dictated one course of action: proceed as ordered. Veronica's smug smile faltered. As the guards closed the distance, the crowd gasped. The tourists near her whispered urgently, warning her to move. The security staff, their patience already thin, tried one last time. "Miss, step aside now!" But Veronica held her ground, phone still raised. "Oh, please, they're not going to." Impact. With the precision of a machine, the lead guard's shoulder connected with her, sending her sprawling onto the cold-stone pavement. The world tilted as her sunglasses flew off, her phone clattering onto the ground beside her. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. But the guards didn't pause. They didn't even glance in her direction. They continued marching forward, unwavering, undeterred. Veronica groaned, pushing herself up onto her elbows, stunned. She had expected deference. Instead, she was treated like an obstacle, which to them she was. Pain radiated through Veronica's side as she scrambled to her feet. Her pristine outfit, now scuffed, filled her with boiling rage. "Did you see that?" she screeched, turning to the crowd, expecting sympathy. "He assaulted me!" Instead of outrage, she saw amused smirks and raised eyebrows. Tourists muttered among themselves, some shaking their heads. One elderly man, a retired veteran, chuckled. "That's what happens when you ignore orders, missy." "Oh, shut up!" Veronica snapped, her face burning red. "I want his name, his rank. I'm going to sue the entire British military." A palace security officer approached, his expression neutral. "Miss, you were repeatedly warned to clear the path. The guards are instructed not to stop. You interfered with an official ceremony." Veronica's hands balled into fists. "I was just trying to take a picture. I have a right to be here." The officer remained unflinching. "And the royal guards have a duty to perform." Veronica stormed off in a huff, swiping up her phone, furious. She tapped furiously, crafting the perfect social media post. "Royal Guard viciously attacks innocent woman at Buckingham Palace. My civil rights were violated." She hit upload, certain that outrage would follow. But within minutes, the comments flooded in. And they weren't on her side. "You stood in their way on purpose. Maybe respect the rules next time? This is the funniest thing I've seen all day." The video of her getting knocked aside went viral. Memes were made. Reactions poured in from around the world. Veronica had become a laughingstock. As the video spread like wildfire, news outlets picked up the story. Journalists reached out, but their headlines weren't the ones she had hoped for. "Influencer learns the hard way. The Royal Guard doesn't play games." Entitled "Tourist Faces Reality at Buckingham Palace." Veronica's brand, once built on glamour and influence, was now a joke. Companies quietly withdrew their sponsorships. Her followers flooded her posts with ridicule. Her worst nightmare had come true. Weeks later, Veronica, now humbled, returned to Buckingham Palace. Not for attention, but to watch, truly watch, the changing of the guard. This time she stood behind the barriers, silent, respectful. The once familiar sound of synchronized boots striking the pavement sent a different kind of shiver down her spine. It was no longer just a routine event to her, no longer just an attraction. She watched as the guards moved with unwavering precision, their dedication and discipline now unmistakable to her trained eye. She had learned the hard way that this ceremony wasn't just for tourists. It was a tradition woven into the very fabric of history. As the guards marched past, she saw them differently, not as props for her social media, but as disciplined soldiers with a proud tradition. Their expressions were unreadable, but their movements spoke of deep-rooted respect for duty and honor. For the first time, Veronica wondered about the lives behind those stoic faces. How many of them had trained tirelessly for this moment? How many had served in far more demanding conditions beyond these palace gates? The realization left her in quiet awe. A little girl standing beside her tugged at her mother's sleeve, eyes wide with fascination. "Mommy, why don't they smile?" she asked innocently. Her mother knelt down and whispered, "Because they're soldiers, sweetheart. They take their job very seriously." Veronica found herself nodding in agreement. It was a small but powerful lesson, one she had learned firsthand. She had faced the consequences of her entitlement, and for the first time, she understood why the world had laughed at her. She no longer saw herself as the center of attention. Instead, she was just another spectator, blending into the crowd. And for once, she was perfectly content with that. Some traditions aren't just for show. They are a matter of respect. The incident remained a cautionary tale, a viral reminder of what happens when arrogance collides with discipline. The royal guards continued their duties, unshaken by the antics of tourists, their legacy unbroken. And as for Veronica, she disappeared from the spotlight, her story serving as a reminder. Some forces in the world do not bend to ego. Some institutions demand respect, and some lessons are best learned the hard way. Veronica took a deep breath as she left the palace grounds, knowing she had learned a valuable lesson. Instead of anger, she felt something unexpected: humility. Looking back one last time, she whispered to herself, "Some things are bigger than me." And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. The lesson stayed with her, reshaping how she viewed the world. She no longer saw traditions as inconveniences, but as symbols of dedication and discipline. She spent the following days reflecting on the values she had dismissed: respect, patience, and humility. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to embrace those ideals in her own life. Determined to make a change, Veronica began researching the history of the Royal Guard and their role in British tradition. What she once mocked, she now admired. She found herself drawn to stories of dedication, service, and sacrifice, concepts she had never truly understood before. Her newfound appreciation extended beyond the palace gates. She made an effort to be kinder to service workers, to listen rather than demand, and to recognize that not everything in life revolved around her wants and needs. It was a slow transformation, but one she welcomed with open arms. For the first time, Veronica understood that respect wasn't something owed to her. It was something earned, and she was finally ready to earn it. Back home, Veronica resisted the urge to delete her social media entirely. Instead, she posted a simple message: "I was wrong, and I learned my lesson." It didn't erase the past, but it was a start. She also began engaging differently with her audience, focusing on meaningful experiences rather than self-centered content. Surprisingly, her newfound honesty earned her more respect than she had ever imagined. Messages of support poured in, some from longtime followers, others from people who had previously criticized her. It was a shift she never expected, but one that felt strangely liberating. At first, the change was uncomfortable. Veronica was used to curating a perfect, glamorous image, one that revolved around luxury and status. But as she let go of that facade, she found herself reconnecting with reality. Instead of chasing viral moments, she started sharing real-life experiences, volunteering, traveling with purpose, and engaging with people beyond just surface-level interactions. The numbers on her profile mattered less now. What truly counted were the conversations she was having. One evening, as she scrolled through the comments on her latest post about historical traditions, she noticed something unexpected, a message from a former military officer. He thanked her for acknowledging the value of discipline and respect, explaining how her story had sparked discussions about modern attitudes toward tradition. That message, more than any viral trend, made her realize just how much she had changed. Months later, Veronica returned to London, this time as a guest for a charity event supporting veterans. She listened, she learned, and she helped. Walking through the historic streets, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. This time, she wasn't here for the perfect photo or social media moment. She was here to give back. Meeting veterans and hearing their stories of service and sacrifice deepened her newfound respect for the traditions she once dismissed. As the evening of the charity event unfolded, she found herself in deep conversation with an elderly veteran named Captain Harris. He spoke of battles fought and comrades lost. But what struck Veronica most was not just the weight of his words, but the quiet dignity with which he carried them. "It's not just about serving your country," he said. "It's about the people beside you, the history behind you, and the values ahead of you." His words lingered in her mind long after their conversation ended, reshaping her understanding of what honor truly meant. The following morning, Veronica wandered through the city, letting its rhythm guide her. She stopped by the Tower of London, watched the River Thames flow steadily, and admired the grandeur of St. Paul's Cathedral. In each place, she saw a piece of history she had once taken for granted. Before, London had been nothing more than a backdrop for her social presence. Now it felt like a living entity, one she was beginning to understand, one she was learning to respect. Before leaving, she made one last stop at Buckingham Palace. The changing of the guard ceremony was about to begin, and she watched from behind the barriers like everyone else. When the guards marched past in perfect formation, she didn't see them as just part of a spectacle. She saw the years of discipline, the unwavering dedication, and the centuries of history they carried. As she turned to leave, she noticed a young woman stepping forward, phone raised, about to make the same mistake she had months ago. For a moment, Veronica hesitated. Then, with a quiet confidence, she gently placed a hand on the woman's arm. "They won't stop," Veronica said with a small smile. "And trust me, you don't want to be in their way." The woman looked at her, confused at first, then nodded and stepped back. Veronica had come full circle, not just learning her lesson, but passing it on. For the first time in her life, she walked away from Buckingham Palace not as a spectacle, but as someone who understood respect, not just for tradition, but for the people who uphold it. And in that moment, she realized that moving forward wasn't just about changing locations or chasing the next big thing. It was about growth, about humility, and about carrying the lessons of the past into the future. As she made her way back to her hotel, Veronica reflected on how much had changed within her. The city she had once seen as an accessory to her ambitions had become something far more profound, a place of learning, of legacy, and of belonging. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in, but rather a participant in something greater than herself. For the first time, she wasn't just passing through. She was truly present, embracing the journey for what it was, rather than what it could offer her in return.